Conversations on Beauty is the IlanLael Foundation's public conversations program. We are now in our 6th year, and we bring the community's diverse voices together in lively conversations about issues and events that matter to our community. We shine a light on positive ideas and explore beauty's potential as a catalyst for change. Our foundation was founded 30 years ago by James Howell, who's on our panel tonight, and his wife Anne, in part to carry on the work of C3 founder architect Lloyd Ruocco and Jim Britton, San Diego's most distinguished and opinionated architectural critic and cultural commentator. Both men campaigned tirelessly to help the city they loved become a leader in all cultural, philosophical, and spiritual matters that make us...
I want to interject if I can before I get to Wayne and Jim, because again, Rich Lou was here, and one of the things he wrote about a number of years ago was something called the Canyonland Spark. We are unique, at least in North America, because of our topography and the fact that we have these canyons running all over all the neighborhoods. And the proposal was, with Canyonland Spark, is to recognize that, number one, not just preserve them for the birds and bunnies, but recognize them as what they mean to people, and then bring the canyons up to the park. How do you connect them? And if you look at some of the students' work, they talked about part of Balboa Park is Switzer Canyon, but we don't acknowledge it. Part of the park is Maple Canyon. How do you begin to connect these things and encroach the park onto the neighborhood and really bring that open space and that benefit out to people? Now I'm going to Wayne now.
All right. Let me regress a little bit, because when I was growing up in Oceanside, besides spending most of my time in the water, I loved to go into the backcountry, which was full of canyons, and I had fantasies of cowboys and Indians and all the rest of the stuff from the 50s. And ever so often you'd come across a discovery, whether it was a carcass of something that died and the bones are there or whatever else, but this discovery as you're going through, to me, is really the essence of the importance of place and what that place means to that particular individual. And when I came back to Oceanside 25, 30 years ago, I tried to find those places and they just simply weren't there. And I felt like I had lost my sense of place, my sense of belonging. So if we're looking at how we can make the park grow, and don't forget, we are larger than Central Park. And yet when you look at Central Park and you look at Balboa Park, you can't make that comparison, because those particular areas of discovery, once you get off the Central Mesa, is simply not there to be found by a person that wants to go there. So how do you entice that? And to me, I would just love to put a small bomb in Balboa Park and kind of just blow it to where fingers would stick themselves into the neighborhoods, because they're already there. That would allow kids, families and stuff to traverse. This is not a unique concept. We had this concept when we were looking at the heart of the city, the Gaslamp Corridor. My vision when I was talking on how we can get rid of 27 porn shops, 3 rescue missions, and make it a place to where a family with small kids can walk down the sidewalk at night and feel safe. And we could not entice those particular developers to come down there and do that. So we started to get inventive. And we said, first of all, at night we need light, and we need businesses to stay open after dark, especially in the winter months. And yet this museum closes at 4 o'clock. We have Mardi Gras celebrations down there. Why not have Mardi Gras, the entire park, up here? And yes, we would have to tram people up here, but have that event up here. Have Comic-Con up here. Have any of the great stuff that we have in the city of San Diego, in the park, and especially for the Centennial. It's just simply not that difficult to do if the city will play ball, to where you don't have to have special permits and yada yada. For instance, I rented my building during Comic-Con to Pixel. And Pixel's pretty big, but they needed 5,000 square feet to sell their stuff. But they did it by invitation. So I wasn't strapped with the city and getting a special permit and everything else. I stood at the door and I say, "Hi, welcome to my building," and in they go. So I think there's really great creative ways to make this work. And I think there's a demand that the people are going to have when it comes around. So let me go back 100 years when the park started. Charlie Collier, a realtor, knew the value of bringing people to San Diego. He knew the value of that, and he was the one that originally came up with a mission revival architecture to pull in, not only, as we're saying, from people from Latin America, but also, wouldn't it be nice if somebody from the Spanish Council, for instance, the Prince, would come here and open up the Centennial? I mean, these are the kind of thinkings that we have to look at, and not just stay really small by bringing in a rock band for a night or something like that. In other words, why would people want to come to the park? For the discovery, for the event, and what makes it very special. So I think that we can really look at the planning. I love what your students have done, but I do think we need to kind of explode that a little bit and make use of it. Golf course, I play golf, but I think there's other things we can do with the park.
They eliminated one of the golf courses, which got us some understanding. Jim.
I kind of tend to, can you hear me? I tend to think sort of in an odd way. But when I first met Mike, it was a long time ago when he first came to San Diego. And Kay and I decided we would take him to lunch and pick his brain. And one of the things he said, I think you said it, because it might have been somebody else. But he said that in Chicago, where he had come from, it's the Burnham Plan? Yeah. Chicago never built above a certain height. And the reason was, it was part of their myth. They thought you didn't build above that, so they never built above it. You don't contradict me. So I think the thing about how do you expand Balboa Park is, if you're a general and you're on the defensive, you're bound to lose. If you're on the defensive, you're going to win. So basically what you do is you don't think about, we have to defend it. You begin thinking that the park, and we have no idea of all the ways that could do it, that the park, or the idea of that the city is for people, and it's for people to do all kinds of things, is what we're after. It's going to happen, it'll happen. If we don't think it, it won't. I think the other thing is this, we designed cities as if they were filing cabinets for offices. I think actually in our time, the places where people meet are what city's about. Restaurants, museums, parks, anywhere, elevators, where people meet, talk to each other. They don't need the offices. They can go home to their computer, but they do need the places that they bump into each other.
I think that's very true. And the more we talk about the fact that we can do everything by electronic devices, the more we see places open up that cater to people sitting there. Even if people go to a Starbucks and sit there all day and nurse a cup of coffee and play with their computer, they're there because there's people there.
Well, people work differently now, and of course technology allows it to do it. I mean, they do you can go and take your laptop, and we have Wi-Fi now. You can go anywhere in the park and do your work. You can go and meet your client there. You don't have to sit in your office. The park can become an office. I mean, everything is sort of, now you're accessible. So the ability that people still don't believe it's truly just the internet is that people are soulful. They still need to be in touch with each other, but you can use different environments to do your work. You can create the coffee shop. I mean, what everybody's calling the third place. First it was home, first it was work, then it was home. Now it's a marrying of the two. And where you do that is in a social sort of, again, living room. And how do you do it? Is that you have a porosity that allows people to be able to come through and filter, and you're allowed the ability to extend the hours in the sense that whether it's through a new festival or there's permits. And now we have this whole thing called pop-ups, where simply you can bring different things, different events, different kind of cafes in an easily created container and brought it and taken and dismantled and mantled all in just 15 minutes. So now the way people look at things, you don't necessarily have to build a building to create a cafe or to create a meeting place or to create what we call a place of collision, where people are interacting and coming together in a way. Yes, announcers.
Well, it is, I have one more question I'm going to ask, because Mary Ann told me at 6:30, you're all going to ask questions and get in a discussion, because the doors have been locked until you speak up, we can't go home. But I want to ask the panel one last question, and I would each of you to suggest 2 interventions that can be done now or in the near term that will begin to help us celebrate what we want to celebrate, but help improve the park and do some of the things that have been talked about this evening. And one would be an intervention perhaps in the park, a pop-up restaurant outside the door here, or something that the park could do that really serve the region. And many of you mentioned many of those things already, but I'd like you to just pick 2 and come up with an answer. You have your answer, you're smiling at me.
This just goes through my head. Yeah, I can pick 2. One, since outside of 4 buildings in Balboa Park that were meant to be permanent, which is kind of funny because Goodhue's building, the only one he actually designed, and that in the quadrangle in the California Tower, were permanent. And of course, Spreckles Organ Pavilion was permanent. But we had an invasion back in the 60s of 2 really nice museums, including one by Bob Mosier, who I worked for. I think we should, since all the rest of them were stage scenery, the rest of the buildings meant just temporary. Behind the facades was not what you saw on the inside. I'd like to take both of those 2 museums and build the facades that were originally there in 1915. Because I think that would spur people, especially now that the Committee 100 has built the arcades. I think that would spur people when they come for the 100th. And this could be very simple. You could even use stamped plaster on the outside, make it just like it was, quick and dirty. We certainly have enough information to do that. But I think that would spur people to see, oh my God, look what we lost and look what we could come back. The second thing that I would do is get rid of all of the cars in the park and come up with systems to deliver not only persons with disability, but everybody else, because in 2 years there's over 3 million visitors, and outside of the electric cart, there was no other transportation that was really in the park, and the people movers. I think if you did that, you would capture a sense of place, especially in Plaza de Panama, that would have a very meaningful position for the Centennial, both of which could be done very simple. In fact, even bringing in a few truckloads of decomposed granite, like the National Park Service does, put a little emulsifier in it, good to go. Inexpensive and ready to go. Those would be my two.
I guess we had a hard time when Matt and I came here trying to find parking. So I understand it. It's kind of a big problem here. But the idea that we could literally figure out places that aren't using their on-grade parking areas that we could build into double-decker parking areas, and we could create this sort of shuttle system that would allow you, but the shuttle system would have a way that it wouldn't just be your normal shuttle system. It would begin to create an anticipation of what they're coming through in the park. So say if we had off-site parking areas that people aren't using, or office buildings on the weekend that aren't using their parking, and utilize that to park there and get people over, but create this whole sort of celebration in this kind of shuttle bus, fun bus idea that would bring people to Balboa Park. They could give them a little bit of history of what they're seeing, and then they could also be able to talk about all of these amazing events that are coming over. And when you got them over there, you get them here. We create along the big Prado area. There's a big sidewalk piece. Some events that actually are integrated with the local neighborhood, and other bigger patrons. For instance, in Venice last week, 2 weeks ago, they had the NTC, which is Nike training camp. They had this big temporary tent they put up. They had their big yoga guru who came in, and it was right on the bus in the parking lot. And it was this big fun celebration. But that was just this to announce that the fuel ban. But we could have celebrations like that easily on that piece anywhere. I mean, there's so much technology these days, it doesn't really require that much to put up these temporary facilities. And when we deal that, what would that get us? We could also have partnerships with people in Japan, your sister countries. I think Japan is one. There's other countries that the park has affiliations. All the people who came in 1915, those sort of touch base with them, bring them back. Develop your global relationships, because everybody, I mean, you have the zoo, you have Balboa Park, everybody knows about it. It's just funny we take for granted because we're in the US, but even people outside the world really come here. And that's the funny part about it. You don't know what you have until you go away and realize you have something quite magnificent, very special. That's an easy one, the global connection. I guess those are my two pieces.
If I can, just because both of you mentioned cars, it's interesting. We have several thousand parking spaces in what used to be the park that are not used on weekends and holidays. It's called City College. They've got multiple parking structures that sit there vacant on weekends. And if you look at one of the proposals, doing the shuttle thing, as you suggested, as an introduction to the park, as you get in the shuttle if you park your car, we can move a lot of our parking lots down there and get multiple use, which you said make things work harder, sort of twice. I mean, we have that. We just have to find a way of pulling everything together.
Well, if I could follow up on that, San Diego is pretty dependent on the automobile, and we're learning gradually that the trolley can get us places we want to go. It gets a lot of people to work every day. It takes a lot of people down to the Padres games and the Chargers games, and there's plans to bring a spur of it up Park Boulevard and bring people to the park from all over the county. Even if that only made a 10% reduction in the need for parking spaces, it would be a great start. I agree we have to get the cars out of the heart of the park somehow, and public transportation is one way. I wanted to also follow up on Wayne's comment about the electric cat, because I'm not sure that you all knew what he meant by that. The electric cats were little wicker carts electric carts that were at the 1915-16 exposition. And people rented these by the hour, I think, and drove them around in all of the public spaces that we wish we had now. The Prado, the Plaza, the Esplanade, down to the Organ Pavilion. And the best thing about this was that everyone wanted to have their photographs taken in these electric cats with pigeons. Pigeons everywhere. They sold pigeon food on the plaza. And every picture, I've never seen a photograph of someone in an electric cat that didn't have pigeons on their body, on their heads, on their shoulders, their hands. But the nice thing is you got to see the people, you got to see the costumes of the day. Everyone dressed up for the exposition. And these carts were all over. There were more than 100 of them. There's a plan to bring them back. And they've been delayed by bureaucracy, but I'm sure hoping that the city fathers will realize how important this could be to the Centennial.
And they weren't really powered by battery. They were powered by pigeons. They were tied to strings.
Well, I'm afraid I'm going to go back to ideas. I think the first one is I wouldn't worry about the rest of the world. We can do it better than they can. And we can have fun doing it. The second one is one of my favorite stories about environmental things. In England, House of Commons, or the big building where the government meets, they realized they had to change the beams. They looked all over England. They couldn't find any beams, any trees that they could make. Someone said, go to our forest department. They went to the forest department. The forest department said, oh yes, we knew 200 years ago that you were going to need beams, and we planted the trees. Don't think of it just as, it's like when I have these kids work with me and I have them laying stones in a stone wall, there's two things you have to take into account. Put the right stone in the right place and make a bed for the stone that's going to go on top of it. If you don't think of it in the long term, it won't make a lot of difference. Thanks for coming.
I am in Jim Hubbell's camp that I think that it ought to be bigger than just Balboa Park, that we need to incorporate the whole city into celebrating this glorious park that we all love. So what if John Malashok's dance troupe created a special dance that was done in honor of our 2015, the 100th anniversary of this park? What if our symphony wrote a special symphony that they perform next year for this event? What if our Padres and our Chargers had a little patch that they wore on their uniform that said Balboa Park 1915, 2015, so that everybody in the whole world knew that the park was celebrating its 100th anniversary? These are things that each of us can do in our own little circles of influence. These are things that don't require city permission. These are things that can come from us, creativity that comes from our community, if we all choose to do that. And that's what I put out, is why doesn't the city step up and fill this void, and we all celebrate the park and not wait for someone else to make the decision.
Hi, my name is Don Wood. I was 3-term president of Citizens Coordinator for Century 3, which for a long time was considered, along with Committee of 100, one of the primary guardians of Balboa Park. I looked at the crowd tonight, and my guess is the average age people in this room is over 50. Okay. Some youngsters, but not enough. If you ask a kid under 50 today, who's Mike Stepner, they may say, oh, I saw his name in the paper. Who's Wayne Donaldson? I don't know. Who's Mike Kelly? I don't know. Jim Hubbell? I don't know. Esther Scott? I don't know, be Evanston, I don't know. So could we do something? One of the goals of this event should be to create the next generation of guardians of Balboa Park. There should be an element in this event where young people can go learn who B. Evanston was, who Esther Scott was, who Kay Kaiser was, who Mike Kelly was. I mean, how do we change this group out with 20-somethings so that we have as big a crowd, and who's going to be on that stage in 100 years, 50 years, who care about the park? We need to plant that seed now. This is your chance to do it and get a youth movement started and build a foundation. Thank you.
It seems like you could take both of their ideas and talk to the high schools, you know, and get them to acknowledge that while this whole celebration or the whole park, the importance of the park, and have them do projects that could then, I mean, they can start the blogs, they can start all that. You could get that going with just a grassroots movement, using that as a school project. So now they have to investigate what the park's about, who they are, what the history is. They volunteer, because that's part of the school, you know, piece. And then through that, then the funding, I'm sure, will come, because they will, with that, they'll see the importance, and then they'll start their own kind of collections. So I mean, that seems to be, that's just a series of flyers or contacting all the elementary schools, the high schools, even simply that way, colleges, to, like you did as your project, because we're always trying to donate projects to the colleges. But wouldn't that be something that would just be super simple to do and get that movement going for everybody?
Well, you're absolutely right. We have a transit system in San Diego that's striving to be second rate. Striving to be second rate. But I think there's a lot of factors that we have to really think about. One is we don't lay out lines. The trolley that Mike mentioned. The trolley and the train don't go where people are, and the connections are not there. And so we've designed our neighborhoods around having to drive in big parking lots and getting on the freeway, and that's another mindset that we really have to think about. If we can't have fuel anymore, and electric cars are not an answer to congestion, they're just another means of generating cars. So we need to really think about designing our cities so that you can walk to a bus, that you can walk to places, you can walk and catch the train and come down here in the evening and come back at night and go to the opera.
I think the idea, if we look at the Balboa Centennial as being an opportunity, as Jim was suggesting, that maybe we use that as a portal that opens a door for a 5-year window of celebrating, a 5-year window of civic improvement. If we can get this project started, that energy might translate into getting some of the intransigence in our civic leadership to start solving some of the problems that we all know need to be solved. So again, government doesn't lead; they respond to us, right? We need to lead. We need to start leading, and they'll be happy to follow because they'll see the wisdom of it.
It's all caught up in bureaucracy that he's going that route. I mean, if you read things that are happening, sort of this urban thing. I mean, now one of the #1 urban spaces is the High Line in New York. That all started with a grassroots organization. So maybe, I'm saying that, and you can think maybe I'm full of it, but maybe the method, instead of using that method, doing things that create this more of the grassroots community where you can, schools. These are people do things to get something out of it, but those are simple. If you talk to the teachers, why can't that thing happen? And that's a simple way of getting things. Patches, Petco Park. I mean, you have all of these people. Maybe the conventional means that has happened before. You guys knocked your head on it, and some other things, and some of the fundings didn't work, and that made everybody upset. But so maybe it's just simply step back and figure out a way to gather up the people. And maybe that's an idealistic answer, but I don't know if you've tried that yet.
I think many of the people here, many of the people in the audience talked about the need for collaboration, the need for talking with one another. And I think that's a critical issue in San Diego. I would argue that we've met the enemy and he is us, as Pablo says. We have a tremendous apathy in this city. Let somebody else do it. Let somebody else pay for it. We don't want to pay for anything. You know, we talked about collecting nickels and dimes for all this. We don't want to do things like that here in San Diego. We want somebody else to do it. And I think maybe the park and maybe this discussion and maybe the fact that the Balboa Park Centennial Committee went under is really a good thing. Maybe it's going to force us to really come to grips with what we want to be when we grow up and do something about it. And I'm ranting because this is my usual rant, but I think it's important and change the way we think about things.
And that's why what we wanted to do tonight was to get everybody thinking about what they can do, because the system has failed. So now what? Do we care enough to make something change? Because that's the question.
Thank you. My name's Jo Brooks, and I didn't expect to get up and say anything, but the question that Mike posed to you, what two things would you do, caused me to think about what things I would do. And I think of this park as a park that's well utilized by people like me. And there are a lot of people like me of about my age, probably about my affluence, probably about my education in the room. But I'd like to see the park utilized by people from all parts of San Diego better than I see it being used now. One inexpensive idea would be something like the Kennedy Center's Millennial Stage with free events every night from 6 to 7:30. And chairs, you could buy $510 stacking chairs, move them around as needed. And invite people from national and local areas to get on a list to perform. It really shouldn't cost you anything because you shouldn't pay anybody to do it. And 500 of those cheap chairs is not much. Another thing I would do is, for the centennial year, have a big tent, kind of a tent that would hold maybe 300 people, and invite the entire community to submit ideas for events that could be held for free in that big tent. It might be, like my organization, San Diego Coastkeeper, is having its 20th anniversary and would love to celebrate it in a big tent in the park. But it might be, some middle school, it might be, I don't know what. And have a lottery for an event every night for free in a big tent in the park. My two ideas.
Thank you. We are very short on time. We have to leave the building here shortly, so your comments are very brief.
Hi, my name is Sergey. I'm president of the San Diego Sculptors Guild in Spanish Village, and I have something specific. I have a dream, but let's be specific. There's Alan Tate just left. He would have liked to comment on this, but if you remember the hugely successful Urban Trees project for the Port of San Diego, that went on for 7 years. It's inexpensive. It brings in the artists. You can put that in the canyons where you're saying you find the treasures. The city can afford it. Why doesn't Balboa Park do something like this for 2015? Urban Tree style. You can use their model, the existing model already.
actually one of Mike Stepner's student. I'm a master's student of architecture, and my project's back there, the enhancing Balboa Park, Plaza de Panama. My suggestions are, I have many, but just quick and direct. In regards to funding, Kickstarter, hello. It's an arts, event. They'll fund it. They'll allow you to put it on the web. We just have to have a solid idea. We just have to come together, decide on what to do. One of those ideas, we all have great ideas. We want to do everything. I'm a big concert goer. I love Coachella, and we can totally have a Coachella in Balboa Park. And instead of just being music and the arts, which automatically say San Diego, we can also include education, sustainability, businesses, jobs, everything. It could be a cultural event. It could be a Coachella of what we want San Diego to be in the future. And we should create a Kickstarter page to start funding it. Because if we start now, we should have more than enough money because the world will support us.
Okay, we have to wrap it. So where do we go from here? We have a sign-up sheet in the back of the room. If you would like to stay connected to this group of people, and you'd like to continue this conversation, and you'd like to see if we could make some of these things, get some people to hear what we're saying, or go outside of the city and go to some of these organizations directly and ask them to start this groundswell of activity and support for the park's Centennial, please sign up on our list. I think we can continue to meet. I know Mike has more conversations planned in May, another forum of this nature.
The Friends of San Diego Architecture have been talking about the Balboa Park and the history for the last year. The wrap-up session is May 17th. Jim has spoken to them, Mike, and others. The astronomers come back, I think. And what we want to do is bring that panel back together to continue the discussion that started this evening and see where we need to talk more about where we're going, and then find a way to follow through. That's the critical.
Yep, the follow-through is critical, and I'm really excited to see, John Wood pointed out that most of us are people of a certain age, but I think I look out and see people of all ages here, and I see people who are passionate, and I think it doesn't matter what age we are. We all bring expertise and love and care and energy, and I think we just need to unite together and start talking to our friends and neighbors and colleagues and see if we cannot turn the tide and create something really special 9 months from now. So sign up, and thank you for coming tonight. We've got to end this evening. Appreciate it.